Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Ginger here with another episode of Fighting the Void. As people who follow this channel regularly are aware, the regular Saturday shows are not a thing for a few weeks here, while I am busy doing 12-hour nights 6 days a week. This happens to be the 7th night, so I'm off. And so I'm just doing solo streams during the meantime, just to kind of keep things going and have a chance to talk about whatever it is that happens to strike my fancy. I'm also doing, or have been doing, irregular Periscope broadcasts, so you can always check out Twitter to see if that's showing up under @FightingVoid over there. And it's usually just me riffing on whatever it is that was bothering me that night, assuming I've got time and I've caught up on all of my podcasts. I may or may not be continuing with those because when I go back to work tomorrow night, there will be no more downtime, and I will be working my butt off, and may or may not have the ability, the coherence of thought to do any of those Periscope broadcasts and say anything of even a little value. So, all of that being said, housekeeping, pretty much. Oh, one more thing. There is also the possibility in the coming weeks that I'll wind up having to work the 7th night. So, stay tuned or not tuned because it's possible I won't be here. If I'm not going to do any sort of show, I will try to let you guys know. So, anyway, what I had decided to do today was just kind of relate a little bit of my spiritual journey. It's not going to be the most exciting spiritual journey you've ever heard. There are no angels in the clouds or anything like that. No deep personal revelations. So it's not gimmicky or anything at all in that way. Well, I don't mean to say gimmicky. I know people do have those experiences. I don't mean to denigrate anyone who does. If you have those, fantastic. Share them, please. They can be very inspiring to people. Mine is more, it's a different style of journey from the type that normally get played out, that normally get talked about on here. So anyway, what prompted this was actually a conversation in a DM group that I'm a part of. And we were talking a little bit about exploring different faiths within the Christian framework, and which one is true, which one is true, which one isn't. Can you tell the difference? Does it even matter? Things like that. And suffice to say, I think it does. But almost no one ever comes to it all at once. It typically takes years, and it typically begins long before you would actually say the journey began. So I'm not going to go just with when I started to become Catholic. I'm going to go way back and give at least a little bit of an overview, starting all the way from when I was a kid, being raised as a nominal Protestant. So, I was raised as a nominal Protestant. What does that mean? That means that I was raised Christian. Belief in God. No strong denominational affiliation. We did not go to church every Sunday. We essentially took summers off because vacation and stuff. Anyway, the church that we did attend was a United Church of Christ church, at least until I was about in high school. And that was I didn't know anything about it one way or another, really. It was just where we went to church. The only time I ever was forced to think about what they taught by anyone else, at least while I was still a kid, was when some other group of kids in the neighborhood stopped and decided to interrogate my brother and I about where we went to church and what we believed. And the question seemed nonsensical to me. I'm like, we're Christian. We believe Christian things. Of course, me being me, even back then, I was like, we believe in Superman. Because, you're going to ask me a nonsensical question, I'm going to give you a nonsensical answer. which those kids took me literally for some reason I do not understand. Actually, looking back, I do understand a little bit. They're part of a denomination known as Protestant Reformed. They're a fairly small group, kind of big in certain areas like Michigan, but nationally they're relatively small. You frankly probably have not heard of them. They're essentially more Calvinist than the Calvinists, is a good way to put it, and which fits my area because my area is a very strongly Calvinist. There's a very strongly Calvinist area. So while, in fact, most of my extended family is some variety of Calvinist. So when I talk about how I was raised, I would say most specifically nominal Calvinist, because that's the type of Christianity that I'm most identified with back then. Even though United Church of Christ was definitely not that. It was, but there was no discernible difference in most of the preaching from when I went there as a child to when we went literally across the street to the Christian Reformed Church that was there. Where I live, there's literally a church pretty much on every street corner. You kind of have your pick. You got to go a little bit outside the city limits of my hometown to find a Catholic church, but it's not a far drive. In any case, so anyway, yeah, we were, like I said, very Calvinist area, United Church of Christ, which, for those who don't know, United Church of Christ, if I remember correctly from my confirmation classes, it is a split off of Methodism, if I remember correctly, which was a split off of Anglicanism. So, and it retained a lot of the external liturgical appearances. There were, the reverend, they didn't call him a priest, they called him a reverend. He wore robes, they were altar servers and a big old altar up top. We did communion fairly regularly, although it was, of course, the Protestant variety of communion where I pass around a plate full of little circles of bread and tiny little thimbles of grape juice. Just little things I remember. And yeah, I mean, there was a choir, they had robes and everything too. So, I honestly, I thought that's just what church was for everybody, because I was a kid and what else did I know, right? Until by the time we went to the Christian Reformed Church across the street, it was, obvious. We had first when we started going, we had a male pastor, but then there was a female pastor that kind of took over for a while. And I think my dad didn't much care for that, but he didn't really say anything about it. We switched though when they started allowing homosexual pastors. My dad was like, "Nope, that's the line. We're done here," and we packed up and moved over. Incidentally, I was baptized in the United Church of Christ when I was an infant. They did, I don't know if they still do, but at the time they did still practice infant baptism, correct formulas, and all of that. If I remember correctly, I witnessed baptisms there when I was growing up, and nothing crazy. I was also, as I said, confirmed there. I don't recall that they regard that as a sacramental thing the way the Catholic Church does. But it was there were classes that we went to. It was a retreat-like atmosphere, and that's when I learned sort of the historical lineage of that particular branch of Christianity. And it, like a lot of people who go through confirmation, to be honest, for me, it was going through the motions. It was a thing that we were expected to do, so I did it. I didn't have any deep, I had no deep belief. I did not experience any sort of personal relationship with Jesus, as people like to describe it. Not that I don't know. I just had a fairly common meh attitude towards the whole thing, to be honest. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. It was just kind of eh. So while I was in my high school years, I kind of had a brief period where I was an atheist because why, that seems out of left field, right? Basically, because I'm also a science nerd. I've mentioned it a few times here. I had subscriptions to magazines like Discover and Scientific American and just Science News, all kinds of things, off and on. Actually, Discover magazine started at third grade, and I didn't end that until I was well into adulthood. So I was reading a lot of science related periodicals from when I was in the third grade. Just ate them up, especially anything having to do with space, anything having to do with cosmology, which of course is when you get into things like the origin of the universe and that sort of thing, and physics. So I very much looked at things like, well, I don't know that I specifically thought this, but I think it's fair to say that I had a train of thought that was like, well, what do we need God for? The universe seems to explain itself to me. It didn't last terribly long, that whole atheist period, because I kind of realized after a while there's still an awful lot of things that can't be explained by science, and also we tend to go through life putting our faith in all kinds of things regardless. It's not, when we're driving down the road, we put our faith in our brakes, hoping that they will properly execute certain functions defined by Bernoulli's principles, and so on and so forth. We have faith that the sun's going to come up every day. So I realized that having faith wasn't really the issue. What the actual issue was, I don't remember my thinking back then well enough, but I knew it wasn't really having faith in something that I didn't fully understand wasn't or shouldn't be a roadblock. So I fairly quickly found myself back towards some sort of Christianity. And I say some sort advisedly. I was also in high school. This is one of those weird little things along the way. I got into, my friends and I, well, basically we were this close to officially starting a cult. Yeah. Without going into a ton of detail, it was this weird blend of themes out of movies, reincarnation, superpowers, the whole nine yards. Yeah, we were dangerously close to convincing. At some various points, we actually believed we essentially had certain abilities and everything. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And yeah, it was really weird. At the very least, we thought we could sense and see certain things. And yeah, but out of that whole time frame, which was a few years, it was mostly during high school and a little bit into when I was in the Navy before myself and my friends realized we were all kind of listening to one of our friends who was a manipulative jackwagon, and he was just sort of throwing in whatever random concept he came across that sounded cool. And he was very good at weaving it all together. So suffice to say, I'm glad we all realized we were being duped long before that, and we all kind of went our separate ways from that dude, although many of us are actually still friends today. And we kind of laugh about that period now. There was one thing, though, that still sticks in my mind that I can't explain out of that period. We were at a local college campus, one of the places where we like to hang out. And I believe it or not, actually not doing drugs or drinking, just hanging out, feeling the energy, as you could say. And I was there with one of my friends who, unfortunately, that friend, he died a couple of years ago now. Heart attack. He was like around 400 pounds. It was unfortunately kind of unsurprising. But anyway, there's a tangent. Anyway, it was just he and I, and we're there following the energies. And we look up. Sky is completely covered in cloud. Like perfect almost perfectly smooth layer of just gray cloud cover. Except, and this is at night, except for 3 spots. And this is the weirdest thing. It sounds cheesy to say it, but it was there. It was basically 2 eye holes and a big frowny face in the sky. Weirdest thing I've ever seen. Can't explain it any way other than to go, it's like, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, you getting the idea God doesn't want us to be doing this? Yeah? Okay, well, we're going to leave now. Not that we completely stopped everything we were doing, but we left that night. And this is a crazy thing. We actually believed that everything we were doing was actually somehow compatible with Christianity. Don't ask. Just don't ask. Way too many comic books, essentially, is the best possible explanation for it. Not that I've got anything against comic books. Just saying, I still read a few from time to time. But yeah, if that's all you got going on, you start interpreting everything in that light. And that actually kind of explains, too, I was teetering on the edge of turning into Dan Brown theology land at various points as well, with the whole Gospels of Judas, with the Gnostic Gospels, were the true God, were actually the real Gospels, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. There was that one point in my life for a few years when I probably would have taken Dan Brown seriously. And for those who don't know, it's the Da Vinci Code. He's that guy. If he had come out a few years earlier, that could have been dangerous for me. Fortunately, I was already well past that at that point. So anyway, I'm in the Navy, and things kind of, progress along those same lines till I'm in the Navy, thinking I've got this weird, really warped version of Christianity that I've done, that my friends and I have put together for ourselves. Very strange. But at some point, about when we realized we were being duped and it was rather ridiculous, I basically slid into agnosticism. But I call it a vaguely Christian flavored agnostic. By that I mean somebody who doesn't really claim to know anything about God, but kind of believes in God, and has a vaguely Christian influenced set of morals that you kind of live by, but there's nothing really defined. And you're not really trying to find out either. You're just kind of going through the motions of life. Like your typical agnostic. A good agnostic is someone who's always searching for the truth. He believes truth is out there, doesn't claim to know it yet, but is always looking for it. The more common agnostic might as well be an atheist, because it just doesn't matter. They're less an agnostic than they are an apathetic. And that described me fairly well. While I was in the Navy, I got addicted to pornography. Did have one girlfriend that I slept with. Not real proud of that whole stage in my life, and so on and so forth. Don't worry, it's all been taken to confession. I'm not treating this like a public confession. I just don't like to talk about it. But here we are, and yes, I can tell you, pornography does warp your mind. It does warp your perceptions of the people around you and everything. For crying out loud, if you're into it, get out of it now. You're probably going to need help. And I'll get to how I got out of it here before too long. And anyway, I had a few things here and there where I went to a non-denominational church for a little bit here and there, and I would keep playing around with Christianity, but never doing anything serious. And it's not like I had never read anything either. Even while I was in high school, I read the Bible. I initially started reading it so I could win arguments, because I like to argue. Anyone who knows me knows this. But it did have a deeper effect, honestly, at some point along the way, and I did eventually finish reading it. Primarily the version that I think I started reading the NIV, but finished off with the King James because honestly I liked it better. I like the these and the thous. I think it's very poetic. I still actually find that for reading purposes one of the best that I have. So, goodness, where was I? In the Navy. Oh, in the Navy. There's a song about that. Anyway, while I'm in the Navy, my brother, somewhat out of the blue, converts to Catholicism. Just like, oh, wait, what? Did not see that coming at all. But he did. And first off, it should be said here that I've never at any point been anti-Catholic. I've always, even going back to my early times, I've had a interesting, you could say, a periodic draw towards the Catholic Church. Like, just every now and then I would, I want to remember at one point somebody asked me what I was, and I actually said Catholic for some reason. It was one because I didn't actually know. And Catholic was, I knew they were the biggest and the cool, they had all the cool stuff. So I just kind of said that. Why not, right? So my brother converts, and I'm like, huh. And I did know a little bit about the Catholic Church. I knew there were lots of things that didn't make sense to me. I didn't have a lot of the sort of hang-ups that people would like. I didn't have a big pre-existing bias against her. I wasn't like, you're worshiping Mary and that's the devil, and I didn't have any of this horror Babylon stuff, nor was I, from the secular end, was I like, well, you hate women because you are against abortion. I didn't have any of those like really strong biases in me, which was probably good. In fact, on the social stuff, I was pretty much on board anyway. I had to, come a little ways on abortion, but I had already kind of gotten there because some friends of mine, they had a baby girl at like week 20 something, and seeing her, I remember actually being there, holding her in the hospital, tiny little thing, tiny little, just adorable little baby girl, and I remember holding her, thinking somebody could have. It's like it would have been perfectly legal to kill her at this point if she was still in her mom. That right there had a huge effect on me. So that's when I really started to become pro-life. I was already leaning in that direction. That was just like, oh, hey, there's that edge. There you go. Boom. There. You're all the way. You're about 99% pro-life now. I had to come a little ways on other things, but like when it came to embryonic stem cells and especially the Catholic Church teaching on contraception, I needed some work on that. But I definitely got there. The Church's stance against homosexuality, I had no issue with that. It made sense to me, perfect sense. And, well, I'll perhaps do a separate thing on that another time, because it's not really important, because there was no hurdle I had to get over. I had to get over hurdles of trying to understand Catholic teaching on certain things, why they believed the things that they did. Like the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, I did not get that at all. That did not make the slightest lick of sense to me at first. And my brother and I, we would actually, every time I came home on leave from the Navy, we would be up all night just going at it. Sometimes it was heated, sometimes it was friendly discussion, but a lot of times we just butted heads, because my brother and I are both very strong, very strongly opinionated people. We both like to argue, and my brother, especially as a fresh convert, he came after me with a freaking sledgehammer Fortunately, I like to argue, so it turns out that was exactly the right approach. Going kind of namby-pamby and trying to spoon-feed me would have accomplished virtually nothing at all. I had to be confronted with stuff. I had to look at stuff hard. I had to, be told, like, look, you don't know what you're talking about. Here, read a book. Okay, fine. We'll see if I know what I'm talking about. Read a book. Crap, I don't know what I'm talking about. That's when I got exposed to authors like G.K. Chesterton, Monsignor Ronald Knox. It's about that time that I started to read Tolkien. I think Alistair McIntyre's. I read him shortly thereafter. It's about the time too that I started to actually read classics. Actually read some philosophy and everything. All around that same time period, like the later half that I was in the Navy, was sort of like a huge leap forward intellectually and spiritually for me. Before that, I had pretty much just read I read my science magazines, read comic books and sci-fi novels for the most part, and that was about it. These conversations with my brother and with other people too really expanded my horizons and helped me see things from different perspectives that I'd never considered before. And that, like I said, very fundamental to making me who I am now. And that's why, if you actually ever look at all the books that I've got here, it's quite the eclectic mix. I've got everything from Star Wars books behind me, that way, to a whole bunch of economics books over here, and then right back there you'll find a lot of philosophy of various kinds. And yeah, it was a very interesting time. So we argued a lot. Gradually, I find myself at least understanding, if not believing, what the Catholic Church taught. Like, I got it. I could see all kinds of practical purposes for things like confession. I realized that at least on the practical level it made sense. It was doing the same thing that a shrink does, just a lot cheaper. So it's like, okay, yeah, I get this. It started to make a certain logical sense to me. I didn't believe it, but it's like, okay, I see some of why you do the things you do. I at least see where you're coming from. Like, when it comes to the Eucharist, it's like, okay, I'm not sure I believe that, but I see where you're getting it out of Scripture and everything. Fine, makes sense to me. I also kind of realized it's like, yeah, sola scriptura, kind of self-refuting, really. Since the whole thing is don't believe anything that isn't in the Bible, since it doesn't actually talk about sola scriptura in the Bible, it seems somewhat contradictory. I don't throw Timothy at me. Parts of the Bible weren't even written yet. Anyway. I have seen better attempts at trying to explain it, but they're, shall we say, I still find them quite inadequate. But that's another conversation. And anyway, obviously I find them inadequate. If I thought the arguments in favor of sola scriptura were adequate, I wouldn't be Catholic, right? So let's see here. So anyway. We started getting there. I literally started calling myself the world's most Catholic Protestant, because at that point too, I was actually, I was believing more of what the Church taught, and this process continued till I got out of the Navy, and I met the woman who is now my wife, and that was good. And keep in mind, and the porn thing's going to come in here in a minute. And we started growing a little bit together. She was actually going through a little bit of her own kind of spiritual reawakening. She was raised Catholic, but fell away when her parents fell away years and years and years before, and just kind of much like me was kind of a Christian flavored agnostic for the most part. And so we met. She initially did not much care for the Catholic Church at all, but that definitely changed one day. Well, I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. We did start going to a church together. We started going to a local Wesleyan church, which is funny because Wesleyan is another branch off of Methodism, as it turns out, which is funny because Methodism was founded by John Wesley, who was an Anglican, and it's just funny that part of my route back was another branch off of that particular slightly larger branch of Christianity. I don't know, something about that I find amusing. So we start going there. We go through this program called Alpha, which is kind of like a basic introduction to Christianity. And I did like it. It was good. It actually got a little bit into the history, a little bit of the development of the doctrine and everything. It was cool. It was cool. They used a lot of Protestant references, the occasional Catholic reference, and all in a we're not telling you exactly what to think about everything sort of way. Sort of a mere Christianity approach, I think it's fair to say. And it did also awaken in me kind of a little bit a desire for an actual, more of a simple faith, that faith that does accept things as opposed to feeling the need to figure out every little thing, which is definitely that's definitely the way I'm wired. I'm wired to want to figure out every little thing. This kind of helps me realize that I don't necessarily need to, and I'm certainly not going to. Basically, I was having a somewhat less profound version of what St. Augustine did way back in the day when, according to the story, he was on the walk along the beach one day, and he comes across a kid who's digging a hole in the beach and trying to get water in it. Augustine asks him, "Hey, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm trying to get the ocean in this hole." Augustine's like, "Well, that's dumb. You can't fit the whole ocean in that hole." And the kid, who probably wasn't a kid, looks at him and goes, "Well, then why are you trying to fit God inside your head?" Yeah. Makes that. I was essentially having that same experience, although without the without the angelic visitation. So anyway, we got there, and of course I'm becoming more and more attracted to the Catholic Church during that same time that we're going to this Wesleyan church, and every now and then I'd go to a different one as well on my own. And I remember this now. Okay, I was at a lot of Protestant churches. They'll do, in addition to the regular Sunday service, they'll do a lot of educational sessions and stuff. And I remember being at one. I can't remember what it was, but it was talking about stuff in the very, very, very early church. And the presenter, I don't recall his name at all, but I do remember he said, when referring to the early Christians, it's like, well, we mean the early Wesleyans, because of course, we've got it right. And that really struck me. Because I'm like, well, they weren't Wesleyans. They never heard of a John Wesley. Huh. Just one of those things, it kind of all of a sudden something clicked. It's like, wait a minute. What makes these guys think that they've got it all figured out and that they've got the actual one true version of Christianity? Huh. That doesn't make any sense at all. Which, of course, got me thinking about the history, how the Bible came to be put together and everything. And like, wait a minute. My brother might have been on board even more than I thought with the whole Catholic thing. But I was still very much on the fence. And we're very much on the fence. I'm like, well, I can see myself becoming Catholic someday, but I've got to really know what I'm getting into. So I was like, because, and to be fair to myself here, I wasn't going to sign on to something unless I knew exactly what I was getting into. Because I wanted to, if I'm signing on, I want to believe it. Because if I'm saying I'm joining your church and I don't believe everything you teach, well then I'm wasting my time and yours. I'm being dishonest with myself and with you. So I was holding back. I was like, well, I want to read basically everything. Basically everything that the Catholic Church has ever written. Don't worry, I now realize that is stupid. Because lofty goal, noble goal, but unless you are like the world's greatest speed reader that has ever existed, That's just not a thing that's going to happen, like at all. I mean, this collection, even the drop in the bucket, it might as well, it's like the equivalent of one word in the Bible. You're not going to have, you cannot live enough lifetimes to actually read everything and understand it. So, but at the time, that's where I was at. I was like, I'm going to read all the things before I actually sign on. Well, then the woman who is now my wife, she had a couple of experiences. I won't go into too much detail, but one was actually just, we were at a local Catholic bookstore, and it was during the kind of confirmation season, essentially, right around Easter, and it was just full, just jam-packed full of people, and just the life, the vibrancy in it had a big effect on her. Things that I heard, had an effect on me. Like I heard one of the girls at work there just talk to somebody, kind of talking about Protestants and how they're all essentially just cherry picking certain parts out of our religion, which I'm sorry is kind of objectively true. I don't really mean that as an insult to anybody. I don't. But objectively, it's kind of true. Not that any one individual is doing that. I'd be like, anyway, that's perhaps a different conversation. I don't want to go any farther down that rabbit trail. Feel free to disagree with me, and we can have that conversation. I welcome it. I encourage it. Anyway, after this, and after another rather profound experience while she was doing some reading in her apartment at the time, she all of a sudden signs up for RCIA. For those who don't know, RCIA stands for Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults. It's basically the way, since 1960 something or another, that people have been brought into the Catholic Church, and it's meant to mimic the process from way back in the day. In the interim, it was essentially up to the priest and his discretion, or the bishop, whichever, depending on circumstance. So she out of the blue signed up for it. And I'm like, I did not see that coming, because up until fairly recently, she was still not really digging the whole Catholic thing. But I'm like, well, okay, you know what? Sign me up too, because I might as well go and get it straight from the horse's mouth at this point. And yeah, before you knew it, I was neck deep in it, and turned out I already believed pretty much everything that the Catholic Church was teaching. I just was afraid to kind of sign on the dotted line. And yeah, that's a variety of things as far as why. Like I said, it was a lot of long, drawn-out conversations with my brother that had a huge effect. It was my wife's willingness to suddenly run past me and just, jump right into the pool. It was largely the history. Realizing that the Catholic Church, put it this way, objectively, there's no one else that can even come close to making the claim that they were there from the beginning. I don't see how anyone can actually make an argument against that. Literally no existing Christian branch of Christianity other than the Catholic Church come close to substantiating that claim. Okay, so that's huge. And then, of course, there's the whole controversy over the Deuterocanonicals. Some of you may know we Catholics have extra books in the Bible. We're often accused of adding things. Turns out a little bit of reading will show you that that's the exact opposite of what happened. Luther and all the other Protestants took those books out. The reasons for that and everything are various and will depend a bit upon whom you ask. Suffice to say, Luther thought it more expedient to follow the canon decided by the Sanhedrin around 70-ish AD, if I remember correctly, which was after most of the Pharisees had already gone and become Christian, so it was under complete control of the Sadducees. And the Sadducees had various, actually, there were certain beliefs that they had that actually are very Christian compatible when it comes to the afterlife. Very, very much. They didn't even really fully believe in anything like the afterlife, at least the way Christians would understand it. But the Pharisees did. So yeah, which canon are you more inclined to trust? Seriously, think about it. Also, the canon that we still use in the Catholic Church today was in use back in the day. The most famous translation of it was actually from the rabbis in Alexandria, who translated what we now call the Old Testament into Greek. It's called the Septuagint. Septuagint because it was roughly 70 rabbis who did the translating. Anyway, so that was one of the big things for me. And then, of course, like I said, everything else just started to make sense. I could see the scriptural backing for everything, including the doctrines on Mary. Not that they're explicit in Scripture. I'm not making that claim. I think they are implicit, but they're not explicit. But let's be honest, so are a lot of things that various Protestants believe, such as sola scriptura, Baptists with their whole thing against alcohol. There's other things as well. But this isn't to go and knock on a bunch of Protestants or anything like that. This is just mostly me talking about how I got to where I'm at and a little bit as to why. So anyway, of course, my wife and I were also still very like normal modern Christians. So we were having sex before we were married. And it's interesting because we realized while we're in RCIA, we had the conversation. We're like, okay, like if we're going to be serious about this Catholic thing, we got to stop. We just can't do it anymore. We gotta just knock it off. And we both agreed, and we in fact did. However, we made that determination a little late, because turns out she was already pregnant. Ha! Surprise! So anyway, we quickly got married not long thereafter, and so we had a Catholic wedding, even though neither of us. Well, she was technically Catholic because she had already been baptized in the church and was just coming back home. But of course I wasn't. It was kind of funny in that way. And anyway, so we did. We got married. A couple months later, we had our oldest, who is now about 16 and a half. And turns out we were actually both confirmed at the same mass that our oldest was baptized at. So that was cool. That was huge. Loved that. And that's basically how I got to be where I am today. And of course, one of the things I've come to realize since is that the more I learn about the faith, the more I learn about God, is I realize that I know. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. And also, it's fair to say that I was never as good of a Protestant as I am a Catholic. I know lots of Protestants who are way better Protestants than I ever was. Like I said, I was always very nominal. I wasn't brought up with a strong belief in it. Suffice to say, it might have, who knows? Things could possibly have turned out differently, but I'm glad they didn't, because I do believe that the Catholic Church is the church founded by Christ. If you want to get more into that and the specifics as to why, I am certainly happy to do so. I may need to do a little research and bone back up on some basic apologetics in order to do so, because it's been a while since I was steeped in apologetics. But I am happy to do so. So, and again, and a quick note on, kind of how I think about everybody else, obviously I think the Catholic Church is right, therefore everyone else is wrong. But that doesn't mean 100% wrong. There is still a lot of commonality between various Protestant denominations in the Catholic Church. Where they agree, we're good. And even if you disagree, it's like, okay, I'm going to take time to try to understand where you're coming from. And I'm not, I believe everybody should come to the Catholic Church. It's the fullness of truth. But I'm also not here to bash you over the head with it. I'm here to have the conversation. And hopefully, over time, through reading, through prayer, through conversation, hopefully you come to realize what I did. That the best, truest path, the one that God intends for us to take to Him, is through the Catholic Church. That's why He set her up in the first place, so that she would lead us to Him. But this is, again, it doesn't mean I certainly don't hate anybody else. Honestly, in a lot of ways, I have a lot more respect for the Muslim that might want to cut my head off than I do for the mealy-mouthed atheist who will smile and say all kinds of nice things to me while he's stabbing me in the back. At least I know where I stand. At least I know where I stand with the Muslim. The atheists will try to, and not all. Please, no, please don't think that. Because again, I was one, and I wasn't an anti-Christian atheist at all. I just wasn't Christian for a while there. I was an atheist, plain and simple. As I'm going through this part, I'm realizing there are various things that I left out. Oh my goodness gracious. That's one of the reasons why maybe this kind of thing should be written out. But there was, back when I was a kid, I went to youth group. It was a Baptist youth group, actually, and we did scripture memorization and everything. I was good at it too. But the guy who really had an effect on me was this old guy, Art. Had good conversations with him and everything, and just he was the first person who really made me consciously, not made me, I said, who helped me consciously accept Christ. First guy. And I still owe a great debt of gratitude to that guy. He died a long time ago. But I still got a lot of love in my heart for that old guy. And I certainly hope he's up there with Jesus right now. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other twists and turns along the way, but I think I definitely hit the highlights. If there's anything you would like to discuss, you can feel free to DM me at Gingerman Editor or Editorial, whatever it is on Twitter, or just go at Fighting Void. You can get a hold of me there. And you can leave comments in the comment section here. I plan on being better at responding to comments in the near future, because as people who have been watching know, there's things going on behind the scenes. And hopefully come November, it'll be shortly after the election. I prefer it sooner, but I just don't have the ability to do so, unfortunately, due to work schedule. So anyway, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you made it through all of this, well, good for you. And again, feel free to pick up the conversation. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right. Whatever. Let me know. And well, I look forward to discussing with you next week. It'll be something different. Okay. And anyway, until next time, guys, stay safe out there, because as you know, it's a crazy world,